Welcome to my channel. Today I will be reading from the Creepypastas subreddit, so let's get into it. There's an elevator shaft in the middle of the field. It only goes down by the reasonably. There's an elevator shaft in the middle of a field. It only goes down. I grew up in a small village in a rural part of Germany. My family had a small farm with a few cows and a lot of fields where we grew vegetables and hay for the cows during the winter. Since there wasn't much to do in our village, me and my two best friends would go explore the fields all the time. We knew every tree, every bush and every nook and cranny of those fields by heart. One day my dad called me over while I was playing with my friends in the cornfield. He told me that he wanted to show me something. He took me into the middle of the field where there was no corn at all. Just a big hole in the ground covered with a wooden hatch. The hole looked like it had been dug out with a frickin' shovel. And even though it was only about 2 meters deep, it looked unnatural somehow. My dad told me that some boys from the village had found this hole a few days ago, but no one knew who made it or why. It looked like someone had dug it just for fun, but it was far too big for that. It looked more like a well than a children's game. I didn't think much of it. Instead, I tried to figure out how I could climb down into it. It didn't take long before me and my two best friends were playing a new game. We pretended that the hole was a dragoness den, and we took turns trying to slay the dragon. Of course, no one wanted to go down into the hole themselves, so we threw stones into it and tried to hit each other's heads. While I don't remember exactly when it started, it seemed like the hole had always been there. It just appeared one day. We played there for hours until the sun started going down. Then we ran home. The next day we went back to the field, but the hole was gone. Only a slight depression in the ground remained where the hole had been. We searched the whole field for it, but we couldn't find it anywhere. I thought maybe it was just a random fluke, and we just imagined the whole thing. But my friend Nico insisted that it had really been there. We never spoke about the hole again, and I never saw it again, or so I thought. A few months later, it was spring, and I was working in the fields with my dad. It was hard work, but at least it was nice and sunny. Then suddenly the sky became overcast, and dark clouds gathered. In less than an hour, the sun was gone, and heavy rain poured down from the sky. My dad and I ran for cover into the barn. The storm was one of the worst ones I'd ever seen. The wind howled like a banshee, and the rain beat against the barn like thousands of tiny hammers. I stood in the barn for a long time watching the storm rage outside. Then I heard a loud crash. I ran outside to see what happened and noticed that a large part of the old oak tree had fallen down. The tree stood right next to the barn, and I often played under its wide canopy during summer. But now the tree was split in half and lay on the ground. I was just staring at the tree when I noticed something strange. The broken part of the tree fell towards the field, and it revealed a small hole in the ground beneath it. I recognized this hole instantly. It was the same shape as the hole I had seen in the fall. I rushed to it and removed the dirt that covered the opening. The hole was exactly the same as the one from the fall. It was perfectly round and slightly bigger than a meter in diameter. I looked around to see if anyone had seen me, but I was alone. No one else had noticed the hole. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and fear at that moment. I wanted to go down into the hole, but at the same time I was scared of what might be inside. I hesitated for a few seconds, but then my curiosity got the better of me, and I climbed down into the hole. At first it was hard to find a good footing because the walls were smooth and steep, but after a few minutes the hole opened up into a large cavern. Inside was pitch black, and I couldn't hear anything except for the sound of dripping water. I found a flat rock to stand on and called out into the darkness. But of course, no one answered. Slowly, I started to get used to the darkness, and I began to notice details. The walls of the cave were very smooth and shiny. It was obvious that they had been made smooth by years of erosion, but there were also strange patterns in the stone that were difficult to explain. There were parts where the stone seemed to shimmer, as if there was some kind of moisture inside. I pulled out my lighter and shined it around, but it did little to pierce the thick darkness. The air inside the cave was cold and damp, and I quickly regretted not bringing a flashlight or a rope. I walked around for a bit, but there was nothing to see except more darkness. It was getting colder too, and I started to feel uneasy. I had brought my phone with me, and I had no way of knowing how long I had been down there. I decided to go back. As I climbed up the hole, I swore I heard voices whispering my name, but I ignored them and continued climbing. When I finally reached the surface, I looked around to see if anyone had followed me, but of course, no one was there. I climbed out of the hole and looked back at the dark opening. I never wanted to go back down there. It had felt like the entrance to hell itself. In the following weeks, me and my friends kept the secret of the hole to ourselves. We knew that no one would believe us if we told them, and we didn't want to make fun of us, but we couldn't stop thinking about the hole. What was down there? Why was it there? Did someone live down there? We considered telling our parents, but the hole was in the middle of a field. How would they find it? And even if they did, what would they say? They would probably think we were crazy. So one day we hatched a plan. We would dig another hole to the cave. That way we could visit whenever we wanted, without having to climb down the shaft. We took turns digging in the hole with a frickin' shovel. It took us 3 days to reach the bottom of the shaft, but eventually we made it. We were so happy to finally reach the bottom, and we cheered when we saw each other through the hole. Then we started to decorate the hole with stones and branches. We made it look natural so no one would ever find it. Then we descended into the cave. It was just as dark and eerie as the last time. We called out into the darkness, but of course there was no reply. We lit up our lighter and made some drawings on the wall with chalk. The drawings looked strange and distorted in the flickering light. One of my friends got scared and wanted to leave, but I convinced him to stay a little longer. We sat in silence for a while, and I swear I heard voices whispering and laughing. But then we decided to go home. We didn't find anything interesting anyway, and it was getting late. We crawled back through the hole and covered it with dirt. I was so tired that I didn't notice anything unusual at first, but then I stopped. There was something sticking out of the ground next to the hole. It was a piece of wood, and it looked strangely familiar. I walked closer and realized that it was part of the crossbeam of the old oak tree that had fallen during the storm. But how could that be? I had seen the beam fall. It had landed more than 100 meters away from the hole, but now it was sticking out of the ground, directly next to the hole. We were so scared at this point that we didn't even bother to hide the hole. We just ran away as fast as we could. Since then, the hole has become larger and deeper. Sometimes we hear voices coming from it, and sometimes we see strange lights shining out of it. To this day, no one knows what is inside the shaft. Some people say that it leads to hell, but I think it leads to something much worse. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like. And if you'd like to hear another creepypasta, just search for more content.